I think it's probably too soon to tell and too soon to say, but obviously pretty gutted about the decision. We thought it was going to go our way, but it certainly has proven that there was no way to win this through the courts. Wish someone had told me that beforehand.
For years they stayed silent while rumours swirled, but secret documents have finally surfaced and the truth is absolutely shocking. Harry's children erased from royal history, titles stripped away forever. You won't believe what the palace has been planning behind closed doors. In recent months, reports have emerged suggesting that Buckingham Palace has made a significant decision regarding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's children, Archie and Lilibet.
I was really ashamed to say it at the time, and ashamed to have to admit it to Harry especially, because I know how much loss he's suffered. But I knew that if I didn't say it, that I would do it.
According to sources familiar with palace operations, official documentation has been prepared that affects the royal status of these two children. The reports indicate that this isn't preliminary paperwork or a draft proposal under consideration. Instead, these are described as final orders that will have lasting implications for how Archie and Lilibet are positioned within the royal framework. The substance of these reported documents is notable for its clarity. According to individuals who claim knowledge of the process, the papers effectively state that the children's connection to formal royal identity has been severed. This isn't described as a temporary measure or something still under review. The language, as it has been characterized, is definitive. For observers of the monarchy, this development represents the culmination of years of tension between the Sussexes and the institution they stepped away from. The palace, which had remained largely silent on matters concerning Harry and Meghan's children, appears to have been following a deliberate strategy all along. Rather than engaging in public disputes or issuing statements in response to various claims made by the couple, the palace reportedly maintained its position quietly, relying on established protocols and legal precedents to guide its actions. To understand why such a decision would be made and what legal basis exists for it, we need to look back more than 100 years to a moment when the British monarchy faced an entirely different kind of crisis. The year was 1917. Europe was engulfed in the First World War, a conflict so devastating that it would ultimately bring down multiple royal houses across the continent. The Russian Empire collapsed, the German Kaiser was forced to abdicate, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire crumbled. In Britain, King George V watched these events with growing concern. The British monarchy, while stable, was not immune to the political pressures of the time. There was widespread anti-German sentiment in Britain, and the royal family itself had obvious German connections. The family name was Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which sounded distinctly Germanic to British ears during a time of war with Germany. King George V made several decisive moves to secure the monarchy's position. He changed the family name to Windsor, a thoroughly British-sounding name that referenced one of the royal residences. But he also did something with longer-lasting implications. He issued what's known as letters patent, a formal legal document that established clear rules about who could hold royal titles. This wasn't merely about tradition or preference, it was about creating legal certainty in a time of chaos. The letters patent of 1917 set out specific criteria that a child must meet to be recognized as a prince or princess. These criteria were designed to prevent confusion, eliminate the possibility of disputed claims, and ensure that the line of succession remained clear and unambiguous. According to historians who have studied these documents, there were three core requirements that emerged as fundamental to royal identity. The first requirement concerns bloodline. A child must have a legitimate connection to the royal family through recognized descent. This might seem obvious, but in the context of European royal families, where titles sometimes spread across distant branches and through various marriages, it was important to establish clear boundaries. The monarchy wanted to ensure that only children with direct and unambiguous royal heritage could claim the titles that came with that heritage. The second requirement involves official recognition. It's not enough for a child to be born into the royal family. That birth must be formally recorded and recognized by the royal household itself. This means that the palace, not the parents acting independently, must acknowledge and document the birth according to established procedures. This requirement exists to maintain institutional control over who is and isn't included in the official royal record. A press release from the parents, no matter how public or widely reported, does not substitute for official palace recognition. The third requirement relates to religious affiliation. A child must be connected to the Church of England through an official christening ceremony. This requirement reflects the unique constitutional position of the British monarch, who serves as the supreme governor of the Church of England. The connection between the Crown and the Church is not merely symbolic. It's a legal and constitutional reality that has shaped British governance for centuries. For a child to be fully integrated into the royal structure, that child must be baptised in a ceremony that is recognised by the Church of England and properly recorded in church records. These three requirements, established more than a century ago, have remained remarkably consistent. They were not created arbitrarily. They emerged from a specific historical moment when the monarchy needed to protect itself from uncertainty and establish clear legal foundations for royal identity. The language used in the letters patent is precise and unambiguous. It doesn't leave room for interpretation or negotiation. It simply states the conditions under which a person can hold the title of prince or princess. For decades following their creation, these rules were followed without controversy. Every royal birth preceded birth, according to the same pattern. Babies were born in the presence of royal physicians. Their births were formally announced by the palace. They were christened in ceremonies overseen by senior clergy from the Church of England, and their names were entered into official records. There were no shortcuts, no alternative procedures, and no exceptions. The system worked because everyone involved understood the rules and followed them. This consistency served multiple purposes. It prevented disputes about succession, it maintained the dignity and mystique of the monarchy, and it ensured that the public could trust that anyone bearing a royal title had a legitimate claim to it. The monarchy, after all, derives much of its authority from tradition and continuity. When the rules are clear and consistently applied, that authority is strengthened. When the rules are bent or ignored, questions arise that can undermine the entire institution. The palace's approach to royal protocol is often misunderstood by outside observers. It can appear rigid, outdated, or unnecessarily formal. But from the institution's perspective, these protocols exist for essential reasons. They provide structure in an organization that stretches back more than 1,000 years. They create predictability in matters of succession and inheritance. They protect the monarchy from legal challenges and political interference. And perhaps most importantly, they ensure that the institution can outlast any individual personality or contemporary controversy. When Archie was born in May of 2019, most observers expected that the familiar pattern would continue. Here was a child, born to a prince of the realm and his wife, who seemed destined to take his place among the younger generation of royals. The public watched with interest, waiting for the usual announcements and ceremonies. But as events unfolded, it became clear that something different was happening. The first signs were subtle, easy to miss unless you were paying close attention to the details. But for those who understood royal protocol, these small deviations from normal procedure carried significant weight. What appeared to the public as minor administrative details were, in fact, early indicators that the relationship between the Sussexes and the palace was not following the traditional script. And in an institution where tradition and procedure are everything, these deviations would prove to have lasting consequences. When Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born on May 6, 2019, the announcement came with all the joy and excitement that typically surrounds a royal birth. Prince Harry appeared before cameras, beaming with pride, describing his newborn son as absolutely amazing. Meghan was reported to be doing well, and the world watched as another chapter in royal history appeared to unfold in the expected manner. Yet within the official paperwork that accompanies every birth in the United Kingdom, something unusual was taking place that would later become the subject of considerable scrutiny. Birth certificates in Britain are straightforward documents. They record essential facts: the child's name, date and place of birth, and the names of both parents. These documents are meant to be permanent records, locked in once they're filed. They're not typically altered unless there's been a genuine error in the original filing. For most people, a birth certificate remains unchanged throughout their entire life. It's a fixed point of reference, a legal document that establishes identity from the very beginning. Archie's original birth certificate listed his mother in the way most legal documents would. It showed her full name as Rachel Meghan Markle, which is her actual legal name. Rachel is the name she was given at birth, though she has always been known publicly as Meghan. This information appeared correct and complete. There was nothing unusual about including a mother's full legal name on her child's birth certificate. In fact, it would be standard practice. However, several weeks after Archie's birth, the certificate was modified. The change was specific and deliberate. Meghan's full name was removed from the document and replaced with a title: Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. This alteration raised immediate questions among those who monitor royal affairs closely. Birth certificates in England and Wales are governed by registration laws that make amendments difficult and unusual. When changes do occur, they typically involve corrections of spelling mistakes or the addition of previously missing information, such as a father's details. Wholesale replacement of one form of identification with another is not standard procedure. The modification became public knowledge when media outlets obtained copies of both the original and amended certificates. Once the story broke, it triggered speculation about who had requested the change and why it had been made. Two conflicting narratives emerged almost immediately, and neither side has ever fully reconciled their account with the other's version of events. According to statements attributed to representatives of the Sussexes, the change was not something Meghan requested or wanted. Instead, they claimed that palace officials had mandated the alteration. The implication was that the institution had intervened in what should have been a straightforward administrative matter, imposing its preferences on a document that belonged to Archie and his parents. This version of events suggested that the palace was already asserting control over how the Sussexes' children would be recorded and remembered. Palace aides speaking to various journalists at the time told a different story. According to sources within the royal household, it was Meghan herself who had requested that her name be changed to reflect her title. These sources suggested that the modification was made at the couple's behest, not imposed from above. The palace in this telling had simply accommodated a request from the Duchess. Neither version has been definitively proven, and both parties have denied the other's characterization of events. What remains undisputed is that the document was changed, and that such changes are highly irregular. For officials within Buckingham Palace who are responsible for maintaining accurate records and upholding protocol, this irregularity represented something more than a minor administrative adjustment. It introduced an element of uncertainty into what should have been a clear, unambiguous record. In the world of royal documentation, clarity is paramount. These records don't just serve contemporary purposes, they become part of a historical archive that will be consulted by historians, genealogists, and legal experts for centuries to come. When a document contains conflicting information or has been altered in unusual ways, it creates questions that persist long after the individuals involved are gone. For an institution as concerned with legacy and historical accuracy as the monarchy, such questions are deeply problematic. The incident with Archie's birth certificate became the first visible crack in what had appeared to be a conventional royal birth. It suggested that behind the public smiles and official announcements, there were tensions and disagreements about process, protocol, and control. More significantly, it meant that Archie's official entry into the world now carried a footnote, an asterisk, a moment of confusion that would be referenced whenever his status was discussed. By the time Meghan gave birth to her second child 2 years later, the relationship between the Sussexes and the palace had deteriorated significantly. Harry and Meghan had stepped back from royal duties in early 2020, relocated to North America, and given a televised interview with Oprah Winfrey that made serious allegations about their treatment by the royal family. The couple had established new lives in California, signing commercial deals and pursuing independent projects. They were no longer working royals in any meaningful sense. When Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor was born on June 4, 2021, the announcement came not from Buckingham Palace, but from the Sussexes themselves. A spokesperson for the couple released a statement confirming that Meghan had given birth to a healthy baby girl at a hospital in Santa Barbara, California. The statement was warm and personal, expressing the couple's joy and gratitude. It mentioned that the baby had been named Lilibet after Queen Elizabeth, whose family nickname was Lilibet, and Diana after Harry's late mother. The announcement was picked up by media outlets around the world and generated significant public interest. People sent congratulations, discussed the name choice, and celebrated the arrival of a new member of the extended royal family. On the surface, it appeared to be a happy moment, handled in a modern way by a couple who had chosen to live outside the traditional royal structure. But for those paying attention to matters of protocol and official procedure, something significant was absent from this announcement. There was no statement from Buckingham Palace. There was no involvement of the royal household in announcing or confirming the birth. There were no official palace channels activated, no formal recognition issued, no indication that the monarchy itself was participating in or acknowledging this event in any official capacity. This absence was not accidental. For centuries, royal births had been treated as matters of state importance. When a child was born into the direct line of succession, the news was conveyed through official channels with ceremonial precision. Even for more distant members of the family, there were established protocols for how births were announced and recorded. The palace would typically issue a statement, place a notice on an easel outside Buckingham Palace for traditional purposes, and ensure that the birth was properly documented in royal records. None of these steps occurred with Lilibet's birth. The baby was born in California, delivered by American physicians in a hospital that had no connection to the royal medical household. There were no British government officials present, no representatives of the palace, no witnesses who could provide the kind of verification that typically accompanies a royal birth. The announcement came entirely from the parents, released through their own communication channels. To casual observers, this might have seemed like a natural consequence of the couple's decision to live in America. Of course, a baby born in California would be born in an American hospital with American doctors. Of course, the parents would announce the news themselves. What else would anyone expect? But to experts in royal protocol, the absence of palace involvement was highly significant. It meant that Lilibet's birth existed outside the official royal record. There was no formal documentation maintained by the palace, no entry in the records kept by the royal household, no official acknowledgement that this birth had occurred within the context of the monarchy. The baby had been born, certainly, and her parents had announced it publicly, but from the institution's perspective, these facts did not automatically confer official status. This distinction might seem arcane or excessively technical, but it goes to the heart of how the monarchy functions. The institution does not simply recognize everyone who happens to be related by blood to the royal family. It recognizes those individuals whose births and lives have been properly documented and acknowledged through established channels. Official status comes not just from bloodline, but from the institution's formal acceptance of that bloodline through proper procedure. Lilibet was unquestionably Prince Harry's daughter. Her parentage was not in doubt, but her birth had occurred entirely outside the traditional framework that the monarchy uses to incorporate new members into its official structure. She had been born thousands of miles away from Britain, announced through private channels, and entered into the world without any of the institutional scaffolding that typically surrounds a royal birth. For Buckingham Palace, this represented something unprecedented in modern times. Here was a child with Windsor blood, descended from the current monarch, whose arrival had been handled in a way that made official recognition difficult, if not impossible. The palace had not rejected Lilibet's birth. It simply had not been involved in it in any meaningful way. The couple had chosen to handle everything independently, and that choice had consequences that would become increasingly apparent in the months and years that followed. The contrast between Lilibet's birth and those of other recent royal babies was stark. When Prince William and Catherine's children were born, every detail was coordinated with palace officials. When Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice had children, announcements came through proper channels. Even for relatively minor royals, there was always some level of institutional involvement, some acknowledgement that these births mattered to the monarchy as an institution. Lilibet's birth lacked all of that. And in that absence, observers began to see not just a difference in style or preference, but a fundamental separation between the Sussexes and the institution they had left behind. If the circumstances surrounding Lilibet's birth had raised questions about her official status within the monarchy, what happened several months later would deepen those concerns significantly. In conversations with friends and in public statements, Meghan mentioned that Lilibet had been christened in California. She spoke about the ceremony with warmth, describing it as an intimate and meaningful occasion. The couple had chosen to keep the event private, inviting only close friends and family members. Photographs were taken but not released publicly. For Harry and Meghan, it was exactly the kind of personal, low-key celebration they had sought to create in their new life away from royal scrutiny. To most people following the story, this seemed perfectly reasonable. The couple lived in California, they valued their privacy, and they wanted to celebrate their daughter's baptism in a way that felt authentic to them. There was nothing inherently controversial about parents choosing to have their child christened near their home with people they cared about present. It was, by all accounts, a joyful family moment. However, within the specific context of royal protocol and the requirements established by the Letters Patent of 1917, this private ceremony created a significant problem. For children in the line of succession, baptism is not merely a personal religious milestone. It serves as an official requirement, a legal step that formally connects the child to the Church of England and, by extension, to the constitutional framework of the monarchy itself. The British monarch holds a unique position as Supreme Governor of the Church of England. This role is not ceremonial. It represents a fundamental aspect of the constitutional arrangement that has existed in Britain since the 16th century. The connection between Crown and Church is woven into the fabric of how the British state functions. Acts of Parliament establish this relationship, and the monarch's coronation includes religious elements that emphasize the sacred nature of the role. For a child to be fully recognised within the royal structure, that child must be baptised in a manner that creates a formal link to the Church of England. This doesn't mean the ceremony must be elaborate or public. It means it must be conducted by clergy authorised by the Church of England and properly recorded in church registers. These records are maintained carefully and serve as official documentation of the sacrament. They create a paper trail that confirms the child's religious affiliation and connection to the institution. According to individuals familiar with Church of England administrative procedures, Lilibet's California baptism was never registered with the Church in the manner that would be required for official recognition. This raises an important distinction. The ceremony that took place in California may have been deeply meaningful to the family. The officiant may have been sincere and qualified in their own religious tradition. The ritual may have followed Christian baptismal practices closely. But without proper registration with the Church of England, the ceremony does not fulfill the institutional requirement established for royal children. This is not a question of whether the baptism was valid in a general religious sense. Many Christian denominations recognize baptisms performed in other Christian traditions. The issue is specifically about meeting the legal requirements that govern royal status in Britain. Those requirements call for a connection to the Church of England that is documented and verifiable through official church records. From the perspective of palace officials and church administrators, Lilibet's baptism existed in the same ambiguous space as her birth. It had occurred, certainly. The parents had celebrated it and spoken about it. But it had occurred outside the official framework, without the documentation and institutional involvement that would make it count for purposes of royal protocol. For the monarchy, this created an uncomfortable situation. Here was a child who by blood had a claim to royal heritage, but whose entry into the world and whose religious initiation had both occurred in ways that failed to meet the established requirements. These weren't arbitrary standards being applied selectively. They were long-standing, rules that had been followed consistently for generations. Every other royal child in living memory had been baptised in ceremonies that were properly documented and recognised by the Church of England. The palace faced a choice. It could create an exception, acknowledging that times had changed and that royal family members now lived global lives that didn't always fit neatly into traditional frameworks. Or it could hold to the established standards, accepting that this would mean treating Harry's children differently from other royal grandchildren and great-grandchildren. According to sources who claim knowledge of internal palace discussions, the decision was made to adhere to the existing rules rather than bend them to accommodate the Sussexes' circumstances. This was framed not as punishment or rejection, but as institutional consistency. The rules existed for everyone and they would be applied uniformly, regardless of personal feelings or family relationships. While these administrative and legal issues were being quietly noted by palace officials, Prince Harry was experiencing his own private anguish over his children's status. According to people who have spoken to journalists about private conversations with Harry, he became increasingly concerned about what his departure from royal life would mean for Archie and Lilibet. He had walked away from royal duties, given up his military appointments, relocated to another continent, and publicly criticised the institution he had been born into. But he had apparently believed that his children would still be recognised as his children, that their place in the family would be secure regardless of the choices he and Meghan had made. Reports suggest that Harry made attempts to communicate with palace officials about his children's titles and status. These were not formal negotiations conducted through lawyers or official representatives. They were described as personal appeals, phone calls made at odd hours, conversations driven by emotion rather than strategy. Harry was reportedly trying to convey to the people who ran the institution that these were his children, that they deserved recognition, that they should not be punished for their parents' decisions. According to accounts that have emerged from individuals claiming familiarity with these conversations, Harry's tone was often pleading. He asked the palace to reconsider, to find a way forward, to acknowledge that Archie and Lilibet were part of the family, regardless of where they lived or how their parents had chosen to live. For Harry, this was not about securing privileges or maintaining status symbols. It was about ensuring that his children would have an identity connection to their heritage, that they would know they belonged to something larger than themselves. The response Harry reportedly received was consistent but unyielding. Palace officials, speaking from their institutional role rather than personal feelings, explained that the matter was governed by established law and protocol. There was no flexibility in the rules as they were written. The letter's patent established clear criteria, and those criteria either were or were not met. Personal circumstances, family relationships, and emotional appeals could not override legal requirements that had been in place for more than a century. One particularly stark exchange has been reported by sources close to the situation. When Harry pressed for exceptions or accommodations, a senior palace aide is said to have responded with a statement that captured the institution's perspective perfectly. The aide allegedly told Harry that decisions about royal titles were not made based on emotion or family sentiment. They were made based on order, established precedent, and the long-term interests of the monarchy as an institution. The crown had to think in terms of centuries, not individual lifetimes. It had to prioritize institutional stability over personal relationships. For Harry, this response seems to have been deeply wounding. He had spent his entire life within the royal system, understanding its rhythms and requirements. But he had apparently believed that when it came to his own children, there would be room for humanity, for flexibility, for recognition that these were innocent children who had done nothing wrong. To be told instead that the institution's rules mattered more than his children's identities was, according to those who have discussed the matter with him, a devastating realization. The conversations reportedly continued over a period of months, with Harry returning again and again to the same arguments. He pointed out that his children were blood relatives of the monarch. He noted that other grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the sovereign held titles. He argued that excluding Archie and Lilibet would create an obvious and painful distinction within the family. But each time he encountered the same institutional reasoning. The rules were the rules, and the palace would not create exceptions. What made this especially difficult for Harry was the contrast with his own experience. He had been born into a title. He had grown up as Prince Harry, with all the recognition and burden that came with it. He had never had to wonder whether he belonged or whether he would be acknowledged. His identity had been secure from birth. Now he was watching his children face a very different reality, one where their connection to the family was ambiguous, where their status was uncertain, where they existed in a kind of liminal space between recognition and exclusion. According to people who have observed Harry during this period, the strain was visible. He had left royal life seeking freedom and autonomy for his family. But in doing so, he had inadvertently created a situation where his children might be denied the very identity he had spent his entire life carrying. The irony was painful. By trying to protect his family from the pressures of royal life, he had potentially cut them off from royal recognition entirely. The palace, for its part, showed no indication of changing its position. Officials maintained that they were simply following established procedure, applying rules that existed long before this particular situation arose. There was no animosity, no personal vendetta, no desire to hurt Harry or his children. There was simply an institution doing what institutions do, applying consistent standards and refusing to make exceptions that might create problematic precedents for the future. Once the palace had established its position regarding Archie and Lilibet's status, the consequences began to take shape with the kind of methodical precision that large institutions employ when implementing significant decisions. There were no dramatic announcements, no press conferences called to explain the reasoning, no official statements issued to clarify the situation. Instead, the changes occurred quietly, through administrative channels and internal documentation that the public would never see directly. According to individuals who claim knowledge of how these matters were handled, the outcome for Harry and Meghan's children was comprehensive. The reports suggest that Archie and Lilibet would not receive the titles of prince and princess that might otherwise have been expected given their position as grandchildren of the monarch. This was the most visible consequence, the one that would be discussed publicly and debated in media coverage. Titles carry weight in the British system. They signal belonging, they convey status, and they create a framework for how individuals are perceived both within the family and by the broader public. Beyond the absence of titles, there were other reported implications. The children would not participate in official royal ceremonies or events in any formal capacity. They would not undertake royal duties or represent the monarchy at functions. They would not appear in official portraits or documentation in the same way that other members of the royal family might. Their names would not be included in certain official records and publications that track the extended royal family and the line of succession in detailed ways. Security arrangements also reportedly fell entirely to Harry and Meghan to organise and fund privately. In Britain, certain members of the royal family receive taxpayer-funded protection based on their official status and role. This protection is not automatic for everyone with royal blood. It is allocated based on assessments of risk and official position. Without formal royal status, Archie and Lilibet would not qualify for this protection, leaving their parents to make their own arrangements and bear the considerable expense involved. Perhaps most significantly from a historical perspective, the children's connection to the permanent royal archives became uncertain. The monarchy maintains extensive records that document its history across centuries. These archives include detailed genealogical information, biographical materials, and documentation of official events and milestones. They serve as the institutional memory of the monarchy, preserving information that will be consulted by historians and researchers long into the future. When someone exists outside the official framework, their inclusion in these archives becomes questionable. They may be noted as biological descendants, but without the fuller documentation and recognition given to those who hold formal status. For observers trying to understand the palace's approach, the key insight is that none of these consequences were framed as punishment. Palace officials, in conversations with journalists and historians, have consistently maintained that they were simply applying established protocols. The institution was not rejecting Harry's children out of spite or vindictiveness. It was following rules that had existed for generations and that served important purposes in maintaining clarity about who held official royal status. The monarchy operates on the principle that titles and formal recognition must be earned through adherence to certain requirements, not simply inherited through blood. This principle exists to prevent the proliferation of royal titles across ever more distant branches of the family tree. It ensures that the core working monarchy remains clearly defined and manageable, and it protects the institution from having to make arbitrary decisions about who does and does not deserve recognition. From the palace's perspective, Harry and Meghan had made choices that placed their children outside the traditional framework. They had left Britain, stepped away from royal duties, pursued commercial ventures, and publicly criticised the institution. They had chosen to have their second child born in America and christened in a private ceremony not recognised by the Church of England. These were legitimate choices that the couple had every right to make, but choices nonetheless have consequences within institutional systems. The palace's silence throughout this entire process has been notable. While Harry and Meghan have spoken publicly about their experiences, given interviews, and produced documentary content. Sharing their perspective, Buckingham Palace has largely refrained from responding directly. This is consistent with the monarchy's traditional approach to controversy. The institution tends to believe that engaging in public debates diminishes its authority and drags it into territory where it cannot win. Silence, from the palace's point of view, is not weakness. It is a demonstration of confidence. The monarchy does not need to defend its decisions or justify its actions because it operates from a position of established authority. The rules exist, they have existed for a very long time, and they will continue to exist regardless of any individual situation or personal grievance. By refusing to engage in public argument, the palace signals that it is not swayed by media pressure, public opinion, or emotional appeals. This approach has proven effective over centuries. The monarchy has survived numerous controversies, scandals, and challenges by maintaining institutional discipline and refusing to be drawn into fights it cannot control. When it does speak, it does so carefully and briefly, offering minimal information and returning quickly to silence. This strategy preserves the mystique and dignity that the institution depends upon for its continued relevance. In the case of Archie and Lilibet, the palace appears to have decided that the best course was simply to allow the rules to speak for themselves. The children did not meet the established criteria for formal royal recognition, therefore they would not receive it. No explanation was needed beyond that basic fact. No apology was warranted because no wrong had been committed. The institution had simply done what it always does, which is maintain consistency and uphold the standards established by previous generations. The finality of this approach leaves little room for future negotiation or reconsideration. Once the palace has made a determination based on protocol and documented it through internal channels, reversing that decision becomes extremely difficult. It would require acknowledging that the initial assessment was wrong or that the rules themselves need changing, neither of which the institution is inclined to do without compelling reason.